Good evening. Welcome to the Bessie Smith Cultural Center and our first Thursday Black History program. This is number 1 of 5. I hope you all will attend all of them. We got some interesting things coming up and interesting things to talk about. But tonight, something brand new to me, brand new to a lot of you all probably. We'll talk about the Steele Home, Unearthed. Okay, I have with me Allison Dominique, okay, and Brenda Pearson, Allison from UTK, yep. Brooke from UTC. So we welcome them to the panel. Thank you. The information you'll get tonight is something unique, and it's, like I said, it's very brand new to me. Until they came along with this information, I knew nothing about the Steele Home. The Bessie Smith Cultural Center, Chattanooga African American Museum. First off, let me go back, introduce myself. My name is Elijah Cameron. Okay, I am the Director of Community Relations for the Bessie Smith Cultural Center. And again, welcome. The Bessie Smith Cultural Center, Chattanooga African American Museum, original goal was to present the many contributions African Americans made to the development of Chattanooga. While this is still one of our goals, we cannot ignore the impact other ethnic groups and organizations have made that help contribute to the growth of the African American community. Thus, the Steele Home Project. The Steele Home was founded in 1884 by Amira Steele, a white woman from Boston, Massachusetts. The Steele Home was unique in this city because it provided for needy black kids that were disabled, diseased, poverty-stricken, and with no one to care for them or no means to care for themselves. We were extremely excited when Brooke and Allison came along, stopped by the museum to talk to us about a project they were doing over at UTC. This is an archaeological project, digging in the dirt, okay? And as I told them, it takes a lot of patience, a lot of tenacity to get down and dig in the dirt, trying to find little artifacts and things of that nature. I would never be able to do it. I'd never be able to do it. But anyway, we were extremely excited, as I said, that they contacted us, and they came along and we talked about some things. And while I've lived in Chattanooga all of my life, went to school at Riverside High School, and this project is in close proximity of Riverside in that area, never knew anything about the Steele Home, and still don't know a lot about it. Of course, I'm reading now, because they came along with this information. So what we have, and of course, this evening, we hope to learn more about the Steele Home. The role of the Bessie Smith Cultural Center and the African American Museum in this project will be to preserve and then present the history related to the information that they will unearth, so to speak. So we would like to thank Allison, we'd like to thank Brooks, UTK, and UTC for allowing us to share this information and be a part of this project. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Allison and Brooks, and hopefully you'll get something out of it as I have already, and we look forward to even more information coming forward.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Elijah, for that great introduction. And we just want to issue a huge thanks to Bessie Smith Cultural Center in general for collaborating with us, for bringing us in, for making all of this possible, and for connecting us with you. This is the reason we're here today, is we want to present the work that we have ongoing and the information that we've developed, but we also want to get feedback from you on what we're doing and what are the questions that you would like to see come out of this project. So we're grateful to be here. And again, I'm Allison Damick. I'm from University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Brooke Persons from University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. We'll give you a couple of different ways to contact us as we work through the presentation of this project. So I'm going to be working through the slideshow that's going over there. It's a little bit distant, so if there are any slides or images that you want to see later on or during the middle, feel free to raise your hand. We can go back, we can show you on our computers, anything like that. So this is just to situate you a little bit where we are. The Elmira Steele Home site is located in between what is now 3rd and 5th Avenue and Collins and Palmetto Street on the University of Tennessee Chattanooga campus. So it's right across from the Jewish and the Confederate and the Paupers cemeteries that are in that same area. And it is now located on 3 parking lots that are currently all owned by the university. So you'll hear me refer to these different parking lots throughout this. You'll see them labeled here. You have the Palmetto lot, which is the upper right there, the Collins, the larger one on the upper left, and the Challenger lot, which is that rectangular one that's towards the bottom. And the Challenger lot is the lot that is the site of the Elmira Steele Home, so we're going to be spending a little bit more time on that one. On the left here, what you can see is the current proposal from University of Tennessee Capital Projects. This is how this project actually all started, is University of Tennessee wants to build a health sciences center, and this is the best location for that building on their campus. So they came to us at UTK in the beginning and said, hey, we'd like to build this health sciences center. This is our plan for it. Can you help us see if there's anything archaeologically significant here before we go ahead? And this is pretty common practice for when developers are working on campus. So at first, up at UTK, my colleagues and I kind of went through the old historical maps and looked at Tennessee Historical Commission, and realized that this Elmira Steele Home actually had a Tennessee Historical Commission number. It was known, it appeared on the historical maps, but not a lot had really been done to research how intact any of the material associated with that site might be. Now this is an orphanage that Brooke's going to tell you a little bit more about, but it served primarily black children in Tennessee in the late 19th and early 20th century, and other children who were underserved in the area. And as many of you are probably very well aware, a lot of the major institutions and buildings that served the black community during that time were completely demolished. They were pushed over, and the campus had a lot to do with that historically. So we felt a really strong ethical responsibility towards this as part of the campus community and development center to actually do the best work we could to document whatever was left. So we decided to go ahead, and also you'll notice the other ethical responsibility there is that this building plan will impact the site where the orphanage was. Now, the team that is working on this at UTC Facilities and Capital Development has been working with us to make that as minimal damage as possible, and they've moved it out of the actual orphanage site, but there will be impact to the site. So we want to do everything we can to document what we can and to do it in the best way possible to minimize any impact. So now, to give you a little bit of context for why this site and neighborhood is so important, I'm going to turn it over to Brooke before I tell you what we actually did.
Okay, I believe it's on.
All right.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so when archaeologists start investigating at a new location, the first thing that we want to understand is kind of the history of the site. We want to understand how it was used over time. And then we really want to try to put that history into a broader cultural context. So we think it's precisely that context that makes these particular sites so important. So forgive me if this is anything that you already know, but I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about kind of the history of these sites and what we know about it so far. We know that the area was largely unsettled up until the Civil War, in part because this is right on the edge of the Union fortifications of the city. So it was really immediately adjacent to the Union picket line and the Union defense of the city. And it was also adjacent to, wrong way. Okay, here we go. It was also adjacent to the Union earthwork fortification that was known as Fort Wood, which is also kind of where the name Fort Wood, the neighborhood Fort Wood comes from today, right? It's a Civil War era fortification, which you can see, maybe. Oh, okay, here we go, sorry. That's kind of where that orange arrow is showing, and which would actually make...
Oh, you're supposed to be looking right there where the orange arrow
so
at the bottom
very
is.
bottom
Yeah,
left. Yeah,
okay.
thank you.
Yeah, you're okay.
So that would make our project area somewhere kind of where this yellow circle is. It's a little bit approximate at this point in time. What's interesting about that for us as archaeologists is that it means that not only is there the potential for us to discover Civil War era artifacts and materials in this particular location, but that also kind of becomes a really important kind of landing spot, and it tempers what happens next. So after the Civil War and the Union victory in Chattanooga in 1863, the rest of the South was still kind of in the grips of the last 2 years of the Civil War. At that point in time, Chattanooga kind of became a landing point for refugees who were freeing other parts of the South. That included military folks, that included a whole range of peoples, but it especially included free blacks who were coming from other parts of the South, and also individuals who were formerly enslaved. So again, that's kind of important for this particular area because it's because of that massive influx of people from other parts of the South who were seeking new opportunities, who were seeking kind of new lives in different places, who came to Chattanooga precisely because it was a developing industrial center. And if you're not sure about the history of industry in Chattanooga, I'll just challenge you to look at all of the smokestacks that are shown in this particular lithograph, which is only a handful of years later in 1886. So everybody's coming to town, that we have a huge influx of people who are moving into the city, which is part of what prompted developers and community activists like Reverend E.O. Tade, who was a community activist, a reverend. He was also one of the early commissioners of education. He also founded the Howard School, which was the first public school in Chattanooga, which is of course still here. He also, seeing that there was a kind of a need for emergent black communities and for people to have a place to land safely and to be, he went to the National Freedmen's Savings and Trust in 1869, and he actually received funding and financing to purchase property and then develop property in the Fort Wood neighborhood, which also kind of included the area that we're studying, which is now part of UTC's campus. So this community, which is what would later become known as Tadestown, became an emergent, historically black neighborhood, and it's been that way ever since the 1870s when this area was when these areas were developed by E.O. Tade. The fact that this community emerged in this place in this time is not really by accident, and it's a part of black history in Chattanooga, but it's of course not the only black neighborhood that was emerging at that time. There are comparable and contemporaneous settlements like in Hill City, in North Chattanooga, in Avondale, in Bushtown, kind of all over the city, and of course right where we're sitting today here on 9th Street, which is now Martin Luther King Boulevard, right? We're kind of at the heart of kind of placemaking in a Reconstruction era South, which I think is kind of important to note. So we can actually see that historic Tadestown community mentioned on this map from 1899. Excuse me. And you'll also note, though, that there are a whole bunch of other structures. Not only can we see the Steele Home, which is noted here as a Steele Orphan Asylum, but we can see the same structure in the subsequent map that from 1901. So again, you can kind of see the Steele Home. It's really clearly marked in both locations. It's this kind of large pink building that kind of takes over the majority of the lot. But another thing I want to point out briefly is that there are a lot of other residential structures around the Steele Home. So I just want to mention that we're looking at a 2-year difference between 1889 and 1901, and I want you just to note how many more structures we're talking about. So again, this is kind of evidence of how important this Tadestown community was in this area, and again, it's looking at the influx of people coming from different places. And the fact that by the mid-1880s, this was a vibrant community with industrialists, with homeowners, with renters, with folks coming from all over. And again, it's kind of a critical part of placemaking in Chattanooga. So I do want to just briefly talk about the 19th century. To say that this was a problematic time or a pretty challenging time for people is kind of the understatement of the year. But I do want to kind of remind everybody what what Chattanooga was like at that point in time. So we're talking about a Reconstruction era South. We're talking about the creation and implementation of Jim Crow laws in Chattanooga and other southern states. We're also looking at a city that's been kind of impacted by a series of pretty serious pandemics, including things like yellow fever and cholera and even smallpox. And on top of that, you have this growing socioeconomic divide thanks to Gilded Age kind of economic development, right? So it's all of that industry that's promoting growth of the city, but it's doing so in a way that divides that wedge between the haves and the have-nots in a way that's really critical. And that made a difference in this community. And it's kind of all of those conditions in the context of a broader, highly segregated Chattanooga that actually gave rise to the Steele Home. So the Steele Home, as we've kind of mentioned, was an orphanage that existed from 1884 until 1925. During that time, it was almost exclusively, but not completely, funded by Elmira S. Steele, who kind of came from Massachusetts, but was a lifelong educator and an advocate for education. So she was a teacher, she was a principal, and then after being widowed at kind of a young age, she just devoted herself to education of underserved communities. And at that point in time, in the mid-1800s, she saw no greater need than serving, specifically dealing with and trying to promote education of Black communities in the South. So after being sent to South Carolina and kind of being run out of town by the KKK for trying to educate Black children, she and her sponsors kind of then came to Chattanooga and selected that as a better location. And she immediately started harassing politicians, community members, everybody that she could knock on doors, to try to tell them that they needed to build an orphanage that would provide for care and education and housing for children who were not otherwise served. And when nobody else would do it, Elmira Steele put her own funding on the line and said, okay, I'm just gonna do it, right? And then she did that until her death in 1925. So when it originally started, again, this is kind of unique in the city because it provided for children who were Black, children who were over the age of 10, and children who were differently abled, and again, none of those kids would have been really appropriately provided for in other locations. It started off as kind of 3 humble wood frame houses. So in the image that's shown in the top right, we think this is kind of what these homes would have looked like. This image is shown as an early image of the Steele Home. So there were 3 of these wooden structures, and they were segregated by gender. So, boys and girls lived in different structures. However, even these homes were immediately set upon by racially motivated arsonists, and these homes were burnt down after only 18 months of operation. Not to be deterred, Elmira Steele again amassed personal funding, insurance funding, and a little bit of community support to build back bigger and better, ultimately building the brick home, the 3-story brick home that we actually see here in the bottom part of the screen. And it's kind of this enduring image of the Steele Home that made it into the New York Times, that has made it into kind of the historic record. And that's the same historic structure here that we see on those historic maps that I showed just a few minutes ago. So, when we talk about historic structures and historic sites, a lot of times we get wrapped up in the details, but I just want to point out that the legacy of this particular orphanage institution is in part wrapped up in the legacy of Elmira Steele, but the more important story to tell is the 1,600 children who lived in this location, who grew there, who learned there, and who lived there and found a safe place at a time that was undeniably quite complicated and pretty tense. It was, I think, a hard time in Chattanooga in the late 19th century. Over the 41 years of its existence, the Steele Home provided scholarships for folks to go to college. She provided vocational training if people wanted to learn a specific craft. It provided educational programs. It provided a whole range of support that I think is really critical. And again, when we kind of pull it back a little bit and recognize that this is a historically Black community it's a part of historic placemaking in Chattanooga that's been in this place since the 1870s. So what we're really looking at when we see the Steele Home and we talk about all of these children is kind of the a long-standing legacy and a commitment to education and the role of education in this particular community, which I think is really astounding. So for us to kind of, when we think about that as archaeologists, these are kind of the issues that are driving us from the get-go, right? It's kind of understanding how we can understand, thinking about how we can better understand not only the history of the historic Tadestown community, the historic Steele Home that existed within its boundaries, but also those kind of early placemaking efforts in the city of Chattanooga. And as Allison kind of mentioned, looking at, in some ways, the earliest vestiges of the history of our campus, which I think we also need to own and kind of talk about because they're important. So I'm going to turn it actually back over to Allison now.
Great. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit now about what we actually did to figure out whether there was anything there to record for the Steele Home. So yeah, the first thing we had to do was figure out in this particular spot where we had a record for this really important place, what was under the ground. And the first thing that we use as archaeologists is geophysical prospection. There's a lot of different ways you can do that to kind of look under the ground without actually digging first, so you know before you dig what you might be hitting. And what we use is called ground penetrating radar, and I'm going to call that GPR from here on out. So that is an electromagnetic wave technology. It sends just what it sounds like. It sends radar waves into the ground from the antenna, and the antenna is what you see that in the illustration. It's the little orange thing on the cart there, where you can see one of our UTC students there, actually on the Challenger Lot site that's on the base there, and the computer is up in the handheld part of the cart. So the person who is driving the GPR basically pushes it, sets the parameters for the waves that are going to be pulsed through the ground, pushes it across the ground, and that antenna records how fast those waves are both sent down into the earth and how fast they return and at what strength they return. So how fast and how strong the return of that wave is tells you something about what's underneath the earth there. And so then when we put it into our computer processing at the end, our software, which you see down there at the bottom, it gives you these vertical slices showing you the different speeds and different strengths of waves all through this, what for us was about a 3-meter depth that we went down to. And again, the depth depends a lot on the parameters you set and what material is there on the ground. So then when you get a bunch of these transects, a bunch of these vertical slices going back and forth across the parking lot, you can stitch that together in the software to create these horizontal or plan photos that will show you what that whole area looks like, and you can cut that into different depths. So we can see what did it look like at 25 centimeters, 50, 75, a meter, like that. And there you go. This is what it looks like for the entire parking lot at 75 centimeters deep. So you can represent this data in a lot of ways, but basically for the purposes here, which you need to think about is the bright white spots or the lighter colored spots are where the wave is moving more quickly through the substrate, and the darker spots are where it's moving more slowly and returning more slowly. So when it's moving more quickly, you can think of that as like sand or rubble, gravel, disturbance sort of areas there that you might see. Where it's moving more slowly is typically going to be thick clays, pretty consistent layers like that, or waterlogged soils, things there. So these are all of the grids that we did. Sorry. Oh, yeah, no, you're not controlling the thing. I am. So there, that's the, so what you're seeing there are all the different grids that we did to put this together. And we did this in 2 phases. I led the first phase of GPR data collection with UTC and UTK students helping. And then a second phase was led by Will Joseph, who's a PhD student at UTK, working with UTC students. And then I took all of this data together and stitched it together back in our lab. And now right here, I've outlined what for us are the features that you see, the more lighter colored patterns that are coming out that represent the footprints of what we think are historical structures at this depth, at 75 centimeters depth there. Now, along with this, you'll see right there all of those stars that I've added to this image. We also did hand augering. So we were looking at our GPR data, and then we were also testing below the surface what material might actually be there at the depth that we were seeing features on the GPR readings. And so 2 things I want you to notice here. One is that big yellow rectangle in the middle where you saw that really bright white rectangular feature on the last slide there. that you can see, that's right smack in the middle of where that Elmira Steele home should be. And it looks exactly the same dimensions and the same pattern. But also, you can see all of these little rectilinear features that are along the sides of the streets there. And that's where we see all of these residences popping up, as Brooke pointed out later on in the later historical maps. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail just to kind of show you this lot in particular. So these are, again, your 50, 75, and 100 centimeter slices there. So this helps us understand at what point these features are appearing, at what point they're really clear, and at what point they're kind of disappearing and we're below them in depth. And so when we are consulting with developers, that helps us say, okay, you need to get down to this depth to clear everything and see what's there. If you're going down below this depth, there's nothing there anymore, you're okay. So as you can see with all of these, oh yeah, it came up good. So with all of these, at the shallower depth at 50 centimeters, that's about where we start to see these features start to appear. They're still a little fuzzy, but the bright pattern is starting to appear in approximately the right spots. And again, it's going to be a little bit different with depth across the site because the topography is a little bit different. It's higher in some areas. It has had a parking lot built on it, so it's, the surface is going to be a little higher and lower. But in many of these areas, we're getting about 50 centimeters is where it starts. 75 centimeters is where it is, 65 to 75 centimeters is where it's the most clear. And then at 1 meter, it starts to disappear in some areas again, although down in the corner you still see it a little bit. So that's kind of our target depth for where this material should be located. And so then, as I was saying, we also did some subsurface testing with hand augers and shovel test pits to test this. And this on the left, you'll see that's what a hand auger looks like. You drill it into the ground as deep as you can go, and you pull it out, and we record all the soils, we record any material that's in it, and we put it in order so that we can test that against our model. And so we did find, and I'm just gonna go back for 1 minute. Oh no, wait, I forgot I put it forward. Sorry. So right there, those yellow dots that you're seeing, or those yellow stars that you're seeing, those are all of the hand augers that we found archaeological material in, historical material. And all of the blue ones are where we didn't find anything. And you'll see that the yellow ones where there was archaeological material, it's all located right in association in between that large structure that we think represents the Elmira Steele home and that secondary set of structures just to the north of it. Now, wait, I forget which screen I'm looking at, apologies. Okay, so this is the kind of material we're finding in these hand augers, and actually we have some of it down here on the table in front, so if anybody wants to come and take a look at it, ask questions. All of this is late 19th and early 20th century architectural material. It's all building material. We've got these red bricks, we've got cut limestone, we've got nails, glass, a few ceramic and tile sherds. So none of it at first glance is like super exciting as far as artifacts go yet, but it is pretty exciting in the sense that it not only was located at exactly the depths that the GPR said that our features should start. You can see right there our shovel test that we enlarged there started finding historical building materials right above 50 centimeters. At 50 centimeters, we hit what you can see right there as a flat stone when we enlarged it to a shovel test pit. That's what we call just these about a half a meter diameter pits that we put in just to take a little bit bigger look into the ground there. It's a cut flat limestone, either some kind of architectural stone or a flagstone there. And that is number 4, if you can see number 4 on that screen, which is right in line with the wall of that structure. So everything lines up right at the depth that we're seeing in our GPR. The architectural materials that we're finding are from the right time period. And not only that, but if you'll remember those images that Brooke showed you of that second structure that Elmira Steele built, that larger one, it was cut limestone and red brick exactly like this. So everything is looking to us like, yeah, we probably have a pretty good evidence here of some significant archaeological material remains of the Elmira Steele house and probably those historical structures around it. So there were some modern utilities that we were able to identify there too. That's on that image there. You can see in kind of the neon green yellow right there. We probably have some pipelines that are going through there, probably abandoned utilities as campus doesn't have any record of them yet. And that'll happen too, but the purple there represents the historical structures that you see around there. And when you overlay those with that 1901 historical map that Brooke showed you earlier, it's a pretty good fit. So there's a little bit of offset there. That's very typical for these historic maps. Even the Sanborn maps that are very good are going to be slightly off when you georeference them like that. But the fact that that shape with the porch facing facing exactly the same way as the porch is there, pretty much right smack dab on that spot it should be, and all of these other rectilinear features are sitting right on top of the footprints of these residences on the map, that is a pretty strong indication of and confirmation of what we're finding in the record, that we've got some significant material there from this house still underneath the site. And again, a lot of these structures from this time period, from the Black neighborhoods of Chattanooga that were destroyed, aren't available because things were built on top of them. So the fact that this site was a soccer field for most of the 20th century after it was destroyed, and then just that light gravel lot was put on top of it, has preserved it subsurface in a way that is uniquely available to us to actually do something significant with now.
All right, so you might be wondering what we're going to do with all of this data. If I were in your place, that's what I would be wanting to know. Well, usually when we see really significant findings like this, where we are pretty much confident that Allison's team found the Steele Home, and that we are pretty confident that a number of those anomalies are historic structures, well, what do you do with that? Well, normally we would recommend avoidance and preservation in situ, where we just don't touch it, don't avoid, kind of avoid those areas, leave them in place. But that's not really possible in this area because, as you notice with all of those structures, kind of everywhere you turn, there will be an impact to some historic structures. So we're actually really proud of the architecture and engineering team and also UT facilities because they have adjusted the research plan. Initially, it was kind of more on top of the orphanage structure. Now they've kind of adjusted it to where it's kind of a little bit offset, but there still will be some impact. So what we're trying to do in our future research is to document, to identify, and really understand what those resources are telling us about the people who live there. So we're looking at the foundations, we're looking at the features that are associated with these sites, and we're looking at subsurface deposits. So the first step of what's kind of happening next is actually happening tonight. So, and this is, I think, one of the most important steps where we're kind of informing people who have a vested interest in the development of campus, who understand the significance of this site. And we're really here because we have an idea of what we think is important based on what we've kind of been, the background research that we've been doing. But we're really hoping to receive some critical feedback and some good ideas from you all. If there are things that we've left out, if there's an aspect of the site that we're not talking about, this is the point where we can totally adjust our research design and incorporate your feedback and incorporate your ideas to the best that we can. So again, we're really excited to see all of you here and also everybody online because you're the reason that we're here. You're the most important part of this. So thank you for coming. So we're excited to see what you all think at the end of this presentation. The next step will also just kind of be a mountain of background research. Us, that means looking at nearby archaeological sites, looking at similar institutions that existed in the late 1800s, not just in Chattanooga, but kind of around the U.S. We're also really excited because we're going to partner with historians from UTC and also probably from UTK. We're hoping, and so we're materials people as archaeologists. Our historians are the folks who are actually much better at dealing with documents and archives and kind of understanding those primary documents. So we're really hoping that we can generate some new information about the Steele Home beyond what we know already. Include by just kind of digging a little bit deeper. And especially, I don't think anybody's really looked at the Steele Home systematically since, the publications that are available are all kind of from the 1980s mostly, and a little bit into the 90s. And so now that a lot more archives have been digitized, we're actually really hopeful that we're going to generate some new info about this site. Once we're done with that, we're on state property, even though it's campus. Campus is still considered to be state property. So because of that, we're going to submit a research design to the Tennessee Division of Archaeology, and they'll give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And once we have that permit in hand, then we're actually going to go into the field. So we expect that to start happening. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I'm clicking the wrong.
I just realized too. We've got too many screens, guys.
I know.
Sorry.
So we can't see that.
There you go.
We can't see the screen in the back. So you'll have to forgive me that I'm clicking up front. My apologies. Thank you, Allison.
It's teamwork, guys.
So right. So we are now going to the first step in our actual excavations, we assume that's going to start taking place at the end of the spring, kind of early summer. So keep that on your radar, keep that on your calendar. Make sure you're paying attention and following Bessie Smith, and if you want, follow us also. But our first step is going to be to strip with a heavy machinery, so like a backhoe or some kind of heavy machinery. We're going to strip the upper strata of the site that we know is impacted and really compacted from being used as a parking lot and driven over by UTC students every day. So we're going to strip all of that soil out, and then we're basically going to excavate with the mechanical equipment just to the top of where we know these structures are, thanks to the GPR. So we're just going to snug up right to the top of it. And as soon as we're on top of it, then we're going to move forward with actual hand excavations. So if you have an image in your mind of an archaeologist sitting there with a trowel, kind of brushing patiently in a ditch or in a pit of some kind with like square walls, and really patiently kind of screening all the dirt that comes out, that's exactly what we're going to do. So we will, at that point, kind of abandon the heavy equipment, excavate it by hand. As a part of our research method, we screen all of the dirt that comes out, and we keep everything, dirt, glass, food remains, ceramics, brick, all of it. Everything that's man-made. So in this case, we imagine that there will be this may generate a significant quantity of material. And of course, we're archaeologists, so we're going to document all of that kind of excessively. So we're going to take tons of photographs. We're going to do a lot of hand drawings. We're going to map everything with a GPS handheld coordinate system. And we're just going to kind of document everything as we go, especially as we encounter those foundations or those historic structures, right? We're going to end up with kind of a picture of what they looked like, and at least as they remain preserved today. So through all of that documentation, will, I think, generate a pretty good sense of what some of these structures looked like and what they were made of and what life was like. Beyond that, we also are going to mechanically trench in some of those features. So we're going to go back to the backhoe in some of those anomalies that we are not really sure about. We're just going to, under the careful eye of a talented archaeologist, we're going to use that backhoe and try to expose some of those materials. And again, the goal is just to kind of think about this like a salvage operation where we're just trying to get as much information as we can before these sites are impacted. And we're going to, kind of collect artifact as needed, identify, document, characterize. That's kind of our MO. Okay. I include this step here just because I want you all to know that we're thinking about it, but this is something that's going to happen a little bit later. So once we finish all of our field work, we're going to go back into the lab, and then UTC will start building, right? They're going to start clearing and preparing the site. We hope to still have a monitor on site who will be, it doesn't sound very exciting, but I promise it is, somebody who's actually sitting there watching the backhoe remove soil. So anytime they're in one of these areas, we're going to be there kind of watching and documenting and characterizing it. And again, this doesn't sound very exciting, but this is how we avoid kind of unintentional discoveries and make sure that we're recovering all of the data from these really important sites. Okay, so back to the present. When we're done with the field work, we're going to analyze everything in the lab. This is where that patience that Eli was talking about really comes into it. So we will count, wash, weigh everything. We'll kind of describe everything that we excavate. Most of that will happen on campus at UTC. Very conveniently, our offices are in right next to these parking lots. So this will be a short trip. They won't go very far. We also are really excited, though, because we're going to send some of the samples from our excavations to UTK, where specialists who understand and can identify animal bone, for example, are going to help us understand what people were eating and how animals were used at the site, which is actually a really phenomenally personal and informative way to look at historic and prehistoric peoples, right? Because we are what we eat in more ways than one. We also are going to send some samples to UTK so that somebody who looks at paleobotany, so looking at plants in the archaeological record. You might be surprised, but there might be little seed remnants and food remnants, and they can identify that down to the species. So again, this is just a really incredible and nuanced form of analysis that we're really excited to include in our research. Okay, finally, we're gonna write a report. You probably could tell that was coming. So this report is going to be available certainly at our UTC library website whenever it's completed. If you're ever looking for it and you can't find it, you have my permission to email any of us and we will send you the link, okay? Okay, so as we kind of move towards closing up, I do want to kind of circle back to some of the most important ideas and the questions that we have after kind of conducting this background research and kind of what's guiding us as we move forward, kind of like the big picture ideas, right? First, we really want to contribute new information about the site. We know that we will do that through the archaeology because archaeology is highly informative. I know the artifacts that we have today are kind of reflecting architectural structures, but as we get into these households and as we get into these sites, we will generate some pretty exciting data that will tell us an awful lot about these people. It'll tell us about kind of socioeconomic conditions, what they eat, how they live. It's going to be really pretty phenomenal. We're also hoping that we can generate some oral history surrounding this project. So this is where we ask you all for so much help, because if you know somebody who knows something about this site or any of these sites or this neighborhood, please talk to us about it. We would love to know. You know, there are probably members of the community who remember this structure. From historic maps, it looks like it was there until maybe even up until the 50s. So again, if you know somebody if there's somebody who's talked about being affiliated with this site, we would love to know about that. And of course, we expect to generate some new data in the archives as well. And to that point, and this is again a blatant plea for help, if anybody knows about if anybody has an idea about where the records for the Steele Home may have ended up, we are interested and we would love to talk to you. So beyond that, you know, our broad kind of big picture questions really focus on kind of understanding the archaeology of the everyday. You know, what are people eating? What's in their home? You know, what kind of personal items do people have? What are they surrounding themselves with? You know, and that's true not just for the Steele Home, for the orphanage, but also for those residential structures surrounding it. Not only will this tell us about those individuals, but it will really help us understand what life was like in kind of this very critical, hard time period in the late 19th century in this historically black neighborhood in Chattanooga. Moreover, this will characterize a part of the town and a part of the city that I don't think we really talk about very much in a lot of ways. And certainly it'll shed light on an understudied portion of our campus, which again, we're pretty excited about. Another kind of interesting line of investigation that we're kind of circling around is the institution and the archaeology of care. You know, this started off as kind of her own personal mission that was informed by her faith and her calling to help people. And it ended up becoming kind of a 41-year institution where she was providing education, care, housing, etc. But this is not the only institution of this type that existed in the late 1800s, excuse me. So at this point in time, the kind of U.S. had shifting models about wellness and mental health and health care. And a lot of that was linked to the institutions that evolved to where people were kind of residential places where people were living and also being treated for things. And in this case, they're living in a residential orphanage. So we're kind of curious about what this archaeology of care might look like. I don't know, this is kind of a big picture question. We'll see if we get there. And finally, we've mentioned this several times, but we really do want to incorporate your feedback. So we're hoping that you all have good questions and comments coming up soon. And we're really looking forward to it because we'd like to use your questions to inform the type of research that we should do, you know, in terms of the outreach that we need to be doing. If there are particular topics that we've missed, we'd love to hear about that because that'll ultimately make this a stronger project. So I'm going to turn it back over to Allison.
Yeah, and so really that brings us back to our final point, which is once again, there are some parts of this project that are set in stone because the university will be building, and so we have to document, we have to do certain practices in order to mitigate the impact and meet the deadlines of the university. But there's a lot about the way that we do this research project that is not set in stone at all, and that's where we're really hoping that we will be able to answer questions that are meaningful to you guys, to the community, to anybody you know beyond this room who might be interested, who might know something, who might have an investment in this. to the Bessie Smith Cultural Center as well, who have been collaborating with us really wonderfully on this. So we want to execute a transparent research process and get public feedback. And to do that, we have a couple of different things in mind. As Brooke said, you can contact us absolutely anytime. We've got cards down there. We're going to put our information up here. That's great. Bessie Smith has very kindly put up a website for us on their site, and we're going to link that to another website that we are putting up as well through UTC. We're going to have a listserv. But we're also going to have public archaeology days. So when we start actually moving earth and looking at this, we want you all to come on down and participate. And you can do that anytime you want. Just contact us if you want to come. But we're also going to have specific days that we set up that are dedicated to getting the public involved, to getting you guys down there, to showing you what we're doing. And any questions you have about that, again, ask us. We'll keep you informed what you want to see, what you want to know from those. And then, again, the Bessie Smith newsletter. If you're not on it, get on it. I'm assuming everybody here is, and that's how you ended up here. But if not, get on it. And we're also going to start some updates as well on a listserv. If you would like to be part of that, we have a sign-up sheet down here you can put your contact info on, and we'll email you project updates regularly. And then that's our project website through UTC right there. So you can check that out. It'll be appearing again at the end. And we're going to have an exhibit here at the Bessie Smith Center. We certainly hope. That's our goal. That's what we've talked about. And so, yeah, once we have our, Brooke talked a little bit about curation. Once we have appropriately assigned curation responsibility with the state to the objects, we hope to have a good number of them here and images and historical information and all of that in an exhibit that will live here at the Bessie Smith Center for you all. And again, we more than welcome your input on what that should look like as we build that out. And then finally, we are hoping to have additional public talks like this. So this is just the first of many times that we hope to talk to you about it as we build forward. We'll certainly have one at the end of the project, but we also hope to have ones in the middle as we have more to show you. And so for that, we say thank you very much. Questions, feedback? Thank you also for sticking with us this evening for this lot of information that we've given you here. But if you have questions now, we would love or comments, we would love to hear them. And if you'd rather save them and get in touch with us in any of these ways, happy to talk with you in that way. You want to come up and take a look at the artifacts and ask us questions there, also happy for that. Thank you very much. And thank you again to Bessie Smith, really, for having us.
Thank you all for being here. And certainly we'd like to thank our online viewers. And we certainly like to thank our event partners, EPB, Tennessee State Art Commission, Tennessee State Government, and UTC. And again, thank you all for being here. Questions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll repeat that just for everybody online. So she was asking if we knew that there were other homes that she was involved in North Carolina and also I think South Carolina, and there maybe was another institution as well. And so yes, we are getting there, and we're trying to understand. I think what maybe sets this one apart, there are some historic descriptions of the Steele Home in some of the local Chattanooga Times publications from the late 1800s, and they actually describe what the home looked like. And I mean, she lived here, and in the upper floor. So I don't know. I feel like this is something that's different. Than it means something different than the other homes that maybe were in other places. But we're at the tip of the iceberg. But yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good evening. I got here a little late, so perhaps you covered this before I came in. What streets are you talking about that this home was?
Yes, let me take us all the way back to the beginning. I'm happy to show you that. So it's in between 3rd and 5th and Palmetto and Collins. And I have...
3rd and 5th and Palmetto?
Palmetto and oh, there it was. Yeah, there you go. So that's right there down there. You can see the little red block that's around it, right in between 3rd and 5th, and Collins and Palmetto are the north-south.
It's kind of adjacent to Erlanger, and so it's kind of bounded by like the cemeteries to the west, so the public cemetery, the city cemetery, or the citizen cemetery,
Yeah.
the Confederate cemetery, and then the Jewish cemetery. So to the north is Chattanooga Arts and Sciences today, and then to the east is Erlanger, like the children's Erlanger.
Yeah.
So that's one of the parking lots. And so, yeah, so Palmetto, Collins, Third are kind of the orienting.
Oh, okay. And what about members of her family?
Yeah, I know that her family, so when she passed away in 1925, her daughter came and kind of closed up shop. And so the home closed pretty soon after her death. I don't think her daughter wanted to continue in that work, but that is one of the lines of research that we plan to conduct, is to try to figure out, because she did have a daughter before her husband passed away. And so, we would like to actually find the Steele family if they're
Right.
around, to see if they have these papers or to see if they have any information about it. We have not had an opportunity to do that yet, but that's on the docket.
Okay.
That's a great question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And I've got one question that was from an online viewer. They wanted to know if UTC plans on building a monument or memorial or signage at that site.
Yeah, that's a great question, and we are actively in discussion with the developers, which is UT Capital Projects, and they're very interested in that. Yes, so that is also something that the architects are actively brainstorming about. And we talk to them about this every time we meet them. This is not just a how do you mitigate the damage, but how do you actually represent this space afterwards so that people remember that this is there and have a place to go and relate to. So the architects are working on that, but also that's what we're hoping to partly generate with you guys, is an idea for how that would be most meaningful and best done.
Are either of you familiar with Camp Contraband? And that answers that question. And then do you realize that a lot of that work was done by National Military Park Rangers, and that they are historians who've been digging around in Chattanooga for a very long time and seem to be able to find sources that other people can't?
Yeah, we will. That's a great suggestion, and we haven't reached out to the national park yet about this to see what their historians know, but we will. And we're kind of looking at this process as, we're going to probably live and breathe this project for the next several years. Like everybody we know is going to get tired of hearing about it. So we plan to kind of cast a pretty wide net, and as we go through the process, as we share information, and yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Well, and they have partnered with the Bessie Smith program to bring programs here and share their history. Do you know if Ms. Steele had any local partners, churches that sort of adopted or that sort of thing?
Yeah, so she was an Adventist and very active in that community. So yes, and she had a lot of, Bert can speak more to this, but yeah, she had, the way she was able to fund this was partly her own funds, but also that she had a lot of people who were, as many as there were detractors, she had people who were invested in this. So that's part of the historical archiving process too, tracking down who exactly
who might
those
have
are.
records.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll say that some of those individuals are kind of the same names that come around, I think, in historic Chattanooga, like Alfred Ox and, some of the Times, early founders of the Times. But they were also members of kind of the Black community. So there, in particular, I know there was one lumber mill, I think, that was kind of along the waterfront. And those individuals kind of tithed like 25 cents a paycheck, everybody who worked at that mill to support the home. And so it's not just coming from kind of wealthy Chattanooga, it's coming from community support, which I think is really critical.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of records that we're hoping, that those are the kind of stories that we're hoping to tell more thoroughly and in a more nuanced way, so that it's not just, to get a whole picture, right, of how this orphanage came through community, survived through community support. One thing that we're going to talk about in writing, ultimately in a probably very much too long report, but this as many detractors as there were supporters. And so, when arsonists started coming to the building and then like burned the buildings down, they called the police force and they then upped the police protection at the site so that it didn't happen again.
Yeah.
It's not that this was a community without roots or a community without support, right? It just is one that we haven't really talked about as much, and we're looking to learn more about it. Yeah, great questions.
Yeah.
And I have more.
Excellent.
I think we all know from animal rescue and from homes for unwed mothers, orphanages, that sometimes the best intentions turn extremely sour. Do you have any reason to expect to find evidence of deaths or burials?
That is a great question. And so with a complicated answer, the short answer is possibly. We hope not. So often you can see signatures for burials on the GPR, and we have not seen any. That doesn't mean they're not there. We have some areas that are obscured because there is some of this, modern utilities damage, the parking lot, signal interference, things like that. It's always possible that we're missing something on the GPR. That's why you do the subsurface testing. And of course, as we know, even in the best run, child care facilities, there can be deaths, and especially during this time, as Brooks has talked about, it was a challenging time in a lot of ways.
And no one to pay for proper burials.
Yes.
No doubt.
And so, yes, exactly. And these are children that often were without other sources of care. So we are keeping that very much in mind, and we are hoping that that will not be the case, but we are putting together in our plan a design to handle that if it does become.
That's also why we're going to monitor.
Yeah.
So we're kind of aware of that potential, and again, we just hope that does not. We hope that doesn't happen. We don't have any evidence so far, but we're hoping that through the monitoring, if it's there, we'll catch it and we'll see it. Hopefully before it's impacted. So yeah, it's a great question. And and to your question about kind of things going sour, that's part of why we're talking about foodways, and that's why we're talking about kind of the socioeconomic reality of living in this community, in this place, in these spaces in the late 19th century. We'll learn a lot hopefully by looking at the data.
Yeah.
And I don't know anything about waste disposal, but I'm guessing the garbage truck didn't come through every Wednesday. Do you expect to find a midden?
That's exactly the kind of thing we expect to find. Yeah. So yeah.
But you haven't found it, haven't tripped over it yet.
No. And again, we've only done those little, call them soda straw, the hand augers that goes in and pokes around. So again, we won't really know to what extent these features are intact until we get the parking lot surface off and we can take a look at it. It's entirely possible that most of the features have been, if not destroyed, then certainly contaminated by just rubble that they knocked the house down, filled it all in, and it's just basically the outline there. Even that would be cool, right?
Yeah.
But in the best case scenario, we're hoping that some of the features associated with placemaking, with homemaking, with things like that are intact, and that would include things like middens, like hearths, like, all of these different, maybe even garden plots, features like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
These are great questions, y'all.
Yeah.
We love it.
Yeah. Hi.
Do you know where Mrs. Steele was buried or where her husband was?
I think, if I recall this correctly, I think that they were in Michigan, but I might be wrong. I know her grave site is known, so I'm sorry that I can't answer your question offhand. That's a piece I forgot. But if you give me 10 seconds after, we'll find it.
Okay.
Her husband died before she moved down here, though, so he is up in Massachusetts. But yeah, we'll find you that answer.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
I just wondered, as you're trying to get more information, had anybody thought to look on, there's like sometimes those Facebook sites that are old family memories, and I know there was one east of downtown where we live closer to 58, but I don't know if there's around here. Just thought I'd throw that out.
That's a great idea. Thank
Sometimes
you.
people put a lot of pictures I've noticed, and, my grandmother
Yeah.
did this or that, so I just thought I'd throw
Yeah.
that out there.
Thank you. No, we actually hadn't thought of that yet, but that's a great idea. Yeah, I've seen similar sites like that. And, hopefully if you know sites like that, email us, let us know. But also hopefully we're going to start up some social media pages for this project itself. And so you can share it to groups that you know like that and have them reach out. That would be
We'll have
awesome.
to get on the information. We came in a little late. But yeah, the one I think
Yeah.
I'd looked at is Highway 58, 153, and surrounding Chattanooga maybe. But there's probably others. I
Yeah.
just looked at that one because that's
Great.
where we are. But yeah, we'll try to get involved. But very interesting talk tonight. Thank you all.
Thank you. Yeah, great.
I'm still looking.
Great.
Do y'all have any other questions or suggestions? We're really we're happy to field them and happy to answer them. We appreciate it.
Wondering if the folks in the Lincoln Park neighborhood might be able to help you with some of the houses that were destroyed.
Yeah, that would be great. Do they have an official organization contact? We can.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
People that were there.
Not right now. So you were walking up, so I'm going to repeat it. So she was asking if we have any information on the actual individuals or the residents. So this, not explicitly right now. We're hoping that we can track down some of those records. I'm not really sure where they ended up. Everything that I've found so far doesn't. They just say that they kind of closed up shop. The daughter rehomed all of the kids who were living at the facility at that time. And I'm not really sure where they went. I know they're not in like the Tennessee State Archives. They're not in a couple other places that I've been looking. So we're interested to find that as well, because I think that would be I would love to see that list.
Yeah.
I would love to know more about it, because that's, again, that's kind of ultimately more a more important story than even talking about Elmira Steele. It's kind of talking about all the kids who were there and lived there. So yeah, we have the same question.
Yeah.
That's a good one too.
I think that's all the questions.
Great.
Thank you both for a wonderful informational session with us. Please feel free to come up afterwards, look at the artifacts they have found, get their business cards, and like she said, we do have it on our website, a link for a site that we've set up specifically for the Steele Home project. So thank you for coming out. Feel free to come up and speak with both of them and look at the artifacts. We also have some brochures or flyers on the back bar telling you about the other 4 events we have coming up. Our next week, we will be partnering with WTCI, and we'll be showing a sneak peek of Gospel, which is a docuseries Henry Louis Gates Jr. has done, and we will be partnering with WTCI and then also having a community discussion with some of our local gospel leaders. So thank you for coming.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much for coming.